welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Dr. Gina Schneider, a licensed psychotherapist, executive coach, and corporate trainer. And she's also the co-director of Schneider Counseling and Corporate Solutions. Welcome to the show, Dr. Gina.
Thank you so much for inviting me, AJ. It's great to be here.
You are welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we'll be talking about. And we'll be talking about neuropsychology strategies for better productivity, health, and relationships. So, Dr. Gina, first to understand from you, that where does this already people were getting to understand this psychology thing, the stress thing, and then this neuropsychology comes into the picture and comes as a solution. Help us understand this, all these, cauldron of all these things together and what comes out of it. What is for a general person like me, what should he understand about all these things? Because earlier it used to be quite confusing, but should they be confusing? Should we look as helping hands?
You know, it's really exciting what's happening now in the field of neuropsychology, because now with these technologies that we have, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI studies, for example, where we can look at the brain in action in real time. So we can see how the brain responds to stimuli, really look into the brain and see what's happening. Whereas before we would have to kind of look at, try to find cause and effect relationships between certain interventions and not really knowing exactly. We would have theories about what was happening in the brain. But now with these, with the new sort of dovetail of psychology, neuropsychology, and positive psychology. Positive psychology is the study of positive emotions and positive behaviors, like what helps us have better health, what helps us increase our productivity, what helps us activate our body's own healing mechanisms. So positive psychology, neuropsychology, and regular old psychology are kind of dovetailing together in the research. And it's quite exciting because sometimes there are just these really simple tools we can use that will boost our productivity, boost our well-being. And they're sometimes very simple and fast. And that's also surprising because a lot of times I think we are used to thinking about having to work really hard over a long period of time in order to accomplish something that we notice. But in the field of neuropsychology, the brain responds really quickly.
Okay. So if somebody has any issue, anything related to stress, anxiety, or anything, should he think psychology or should he think neuropsychology? And when he goes to a doctor, say even a psychologist, should he talk about neuropsychology, or the doctor will himself or herself talk about it? Or is it that one goes directly to a neuropsychologist? How does it work? It's an advancement, if I understand, in a layman's person. So why should a person not directly go to a neuropsychologist and just go to a pure simple psychologist? It is like those experts earlier, the internal medicine one is the general physician and was in his expert. So nowadays people, whatever it is, they just go to the expert and forget about the general physician.
Those are great questions, AJ. And I think what I would recommend is if the primary symptom you're experiencing is anxiety and stress, I think I would go to a psychologist first. And most psychologists, if you are having a recent sort of decline in your well-being and your emotional health, and it's pretty abrupt change from where you would normally be, most psychologists will ethically recommend a complete medical physical, because sometimes medical conditions can cause depression and anxiety, right? So we could have, for example, a thyroid imbalance, or we could have some other kind of hormonal issue. Or so if somebody has had a recent head injury and then it's accompanied by changes in our mood and mental health, most psychologists or physicians would recommend a neuropsychology evaluation, neuropsychological evaluation, to look at the brain and see if there is some kind of brain damage going on that could be remedied by, a neurological intervention of some sort. Most people, I think, when they come to me with a sort of a recent decline in their well-being and functioning, I always recommend a complete physical just to rule out some kind of medical condition. Sometimes people will have vitamin D deficiencies. They will have deficiencies in their diet that downgrade their mood. So we want to get both the physical health and the mental health working together, because the brain is connected to the body. So we sort of think of it as a dual thing, but we're one nervous system, right? One organism, and what's going on in our brain connects through the vagus nerve to all the major organs in our body, and vice versa. What's happening in our gut, if we're not eating a nutritious diet, it's going to affect the neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is the brain's natural antidepressant. So if our gut is out of balance, we may have then some depression and anxiety that affects us emotionally. So what I would start with, if I'm having emotional issues and I'm not necessarily having a physical health issue, is go to a psychologist and see if some of these psychological techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you learn to think differently, maybe you learn to do some behaviors that boost your mood, like meditation, exercise, managing your relationships so that you feel more fulfilled in your relationships. Those kind of things can boost our mood. So most psychologists will start working on that and that end. And then if somebody isn't improving or starting to be able to make some changes, we might recommend other interventions like, medical intervention, seeing a psychiatrist, because sometimes people do need medication to give them that extra boost so that they can take a morning walk or do some of the things that would naturally boost their mood.
Right, right, doctor. You talk about frazzle brain. You have written a book on that. That's the name of the book. Frazzle brain, break free from anxiety, anger, and stress using advanced discoveries in neuropsychology. Now, each a day, everyone from morning till night, till they put their phones, in somewhere else, they go through so many different emotions, so many different things, and all these things are processed by your brain. And sometimes the brain may have its own issues with so many processing of things. How does one know whether it is stress, it is anxiety, it is some other issue, or is it that it is a condition called frazzle brain, and that I should seek immediate help for that? How do you differentiate between that? Because somebody else will say, minor stress, you do this and it will be fine. Help us understand that difference, and that will be a lot of information for general people, especially.
Well, I think you're bringing up some good points. I call frazzle brain the condition where you feel anxiety, irritability, anger, and some external stresses, right? You might have some demands that are increasing at work, maybe demands that are increasing at home. You have aging parents or children that are ill, or needing extra care because they need extra training or some kind of medical care. And then on top of, or you may have your own physical health that you're struggling with on top of the demands of life, and you're feeling irritable and you're feeling agitated. So frazzle brain is this sort of condition where you're feeling a lot of internal conflict. I don't know what the right thing to do is to help my child, or I don't know how, I don't know what's wrong with my body. I have to go to the doctor, or I don't know how to manage this difficult situation at work. So you're feeling a lot of internal conflict, and internal conflict sort of manifests as anxiety, and that can create irritability, and then whatever external stresses are on us, that piled together is what I call frazzle brain. So I do think that anxiety and stress are part of life. And actually, stress isn't harmful in and of itself. In fact, stress can be enhancing to our life. It's usually associated with growth. And I like to think of healthy stress as like things that are novel or new, like a new job is stressful, but it's kind of exciting, right? So new things, novel things, interesting things, challenging things, and exciting things can feel stressful, but they're also good for our health and for our growth. So sometimes if we're trying to manage stress, if we tune into with an attitude of curiosity, like what's interesting about this new thing I'm going through? Am I going to get to learn a little something about medical health or the brain? Or, is there something interesting here for me? Is this new? Is this a challenge that will help me grow? Then that kind of seeing stress as enhancing as opposed to stress as harmful is very effective in calming our body's nervous system a little bit and helping us adapt to the normal stresses of life and help us grow and advance. If everything's too easy, we don't grow. So
Right.
having some challenge in our life is really good for us. So there's a lot of studies showing that if we can cultivate the stress is enhancing, stress can be good for us mindset, and we aim our attention to what is going to be helpful. What can I learn from this? What's interesting about this? Then it helps us rise to that level and cope better. It is true, though, that if we're chronically stressed, for example, we're living with hostile people, or we're working in a hostile environment where we're feeling constantly afraid, constantly unbalanced, attacked, insulted, demeaned, unsafe physically. Some people work in unsafe physical environments and they don't feel they're supported at all. That kind of chronic stress is something we may want to find a plan to get out of. And while we're in it, find a way to cope better with it so that it doesn't take that big of a load on our body. Because we all need safe spaces. We need safe spaces emotionally where we can be ourselves. We need safe spaces physically, right? Otherwise, our body generates a lot of stress chemicals that can, over a long period of time, be harmful.
Right, right, Dr. Gina. So let me understand it from a common man's perspective. I'm talking about a person like me, is that you talked about healthy stress and unhealthy stress. How do I know whether I am experiencing healthy stress or is it an unhealthy stress? Is there a different sort of a feeling with these two things? How does a situation in a workplace where there are different levels of peers and every organization has some difficulty in one way or the other, so how do I know, okay, this is something good, this is something bad? Secondly, if you do an MRI, will the brain show, oh, this is healthy stress, this is unhealthy stress, this guy is good? How does it work? And because you talked about neuropsychology and with advanced techniques, how does that work? How does do these things identify such emotions which we thought that do not have any indication? Maybe new techniques, new designs will help us understand that. Couple of things here. You are the expert. All interrelated. You can answer them at your own pace.
Well, you're asking such great questions. I do think rather than asking ourselves, is this healthy or unhealthy stress? It might be helpful to say, How can I cope with this thing that is bothering me right now? How can I cope well with it? How can I find something interesting, or how can I be curious about this and help myself through it? What can I learn from this situation that can help me adapt better to life? How can I take good care of myself through this difficult period? Those are good questions. The how can I cope questions are much more useful and helpful than is this good or bad? Because we are the ones that define whether something is good or bad. So if we're defining it as bad, we're going to stiffen up and tighten up our body, and we might then have a less effective response to the stress if we are looking at it as something really bad. So I do think it's how can I cope questions are better, and maybe even who can I elicit to or find to help me through this, or give me some ideas or help me cope better. Because the key to successful life is the ability to adapt. Because we know one thing for sure is that nothing is permanent. So we need to always be able to adapt to change, both changes in ourselves, changes in our bodies, changes in our health, changes in our circumstances, and then changes outside of us, changes in jobs and industry. And we're seeing this rapid turnover in technology and all of this stuff, which is just constant change. So the more that we can be a little bit more emotionally flexible and say, okay, right now this is bothering me. How can I adapt to this? How can I help myself? And so there are tools we can use. For example, neuropsychology tells us a morning walk, getting morning sun in our eyes, helps set our circadian rhythm for the day and helps us sleep better at night. So if you get a little bit of morning exercise, if you can take a little walk in the morning and get some sunlight, your dopamine levels go up. Dopamine is a motivational hormone. It motivates us to want to get stuff done and make stuff happen. There sometimes is some pleasure associated with dopamine, but mostly it's like, let's get moving. I'm excited to get on with my day. So a morning walk, very simple thing to do for most people. If you live in a safe neighborhood, or if you can drive to a safe neighborhood where you can walk. The other thing that is really easy we can do is cold shower in the morning. If you can get cold water on your body, jump in a lake, river, ocean, or just put some cold water on your body. That's worth about 4 hours of motivation in dopamine levels, and it's very refreshing if you can get used to doing that. And that's very helpful and activates our brain. Movement, exercise, that activates BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which helps us learn, helps our brain adapt, helps with what's called neuroplasticity, or the ability for the brain to form new neurons and change and adapt to our circumstances. So if we can get those three things going with exercise, morning light, and cold water, those don't take a ton of time, and that can really add to our productivity, our feelings of motivation, and our ability to adapt to stress.
Right, right, doctor. Now, you are a coping skills expert, 25 years in helping people regulate difficult emotions and conflicts. As a general person, I understand, our brain helps us to say about fight or flight. In terms of when we meet wrong sort of people, when we see danger, we think let's run away. What about the negative sort of people when we meet them, and we don't think of running away? We still try to be there. We try to cope with that situation. How do these coping skills help us Or is it that these coping skills also take us deep within the negative people, because you have better coping mechanism, you think you will be able to cope with such situations? How does these things work together? Why not we run away from, just like we run away from danger, why don't we run away from toxic people or toxic environment immediately?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do get a lot of people in my consulting practice, my executive coaching practice, that are working with a hostile employee, or a hostile manager or supervisor or boss or CEO. And they're having a lot of emotional upset and upheaval, trouble sleeping at night,
Yeah.
because it's not easy to just go out and replace that job. You need that job for your income to support your family. And so how do you cope with, if you were to meet a hostile person in the street that you don't know, your instinct might be to run or fight, or in some cases, hiding or freezing is the best response if we're dealing with hostility and violence out in the world. So our body often will tell us the right thing to do. If we have a stranger that is, dangerous, our body will tell us to run, fight, or freeze, because that's kind of wired into us. In a workplace situation, though, you are dependent on a person, or like a lot of times in marriages, people are dependent on each other to raise children together, to financially support one another. And so, if that marriage is becoming hostile, violent, unsafe, then people need support outside of that marriage to be able to get some safety. So, I know in my work, we work a lot with anger management. So if people have this feeling of a lack of safety, we teach them some anger management tools. Sometimes if there's criminal violence, they have to go into a year-long program where they learn to stop being violent. And in some cases, those marriages cannot last because it's unsafe for people to be in a violent environment over time. So so those are all different situations. But if your livelihood depends on your job, and you don't immediately have another job to go to where you will likely not have a hostile employee or employer, then there are coping strategies, and I coach people on that. How do you protect yourself? How do you protect your health? How can you be assertive and demand better treatment in a professional manner? How do you get support so that you can cope with this person? And a lot of that has to do with how you see the person. I have found that bullies are often quite weak emotionally.
Right.
Bullies are often covering up for feelings of incompetence. Bullies are often covering up for feelings of fear and not wanting to be caught at being stupid or incompetent or
Absolutely. Right.
incapable. So a lot of times, if we can see the bully as a behavioral strategy someone uses to hide from being seen as incompetent, then we can cultivate a tiny bit of compassion for the fragility of that person. And that can help us cope better than if we just see ourselves as a victim and the other person as a persecutor. So as soon as we've sort of thought of ourselves as a victim, we start to feel weak or less than. And the other person's a persecutor, we see them as strong and having more. Sometimes in a corporation, somebody has more power. They make more money, they're at a higher level of status. But in the real world of humanity, they're not any better than we are, right? If you're in a lower rung of the corporation, you're still an important person in that corporation. You still are a human being deserving of respect and dignity and safety. So I do think how we see bullies in the workplace and hostile people can shift how we feel. And if we can cultivate a tiny bit of compassion, oh, this poor person is very weak. We still don't like it. We still don't like being treated that way. However, we're now taking ourselves out of the role of victim and more in the role of how do I strategize with this person so that I can get my needs met in the workplace, still maintain my professionalism, and not be mistreated.
Right, right. So it all starts with the brain, and this is such an important, most important. It is all the engine of our existence. So, how do we take care of our brains? Is it in this fast running life when every demand is made of us, and it all falls on our brain to process it, to deliver it or to not deliver it? Help us with some tips so that we can protect our brain from being a frazzle brain.
Great questions. I think the biggest thing is looking at good habits of overall health. So, fruits and vegetables, a good diet that consists of mostly, plant-based fruits and vegetables and things like that, helps to fuel the brain, gives it all of the tools it needs to have the proper neurotransmitters or brain chemicals, so that your brain functions properly and your body functions properly. Getting good sleep. And how do we get good sleep? We turn off our devices at least an hour before we go to bed and an hour before we want to sleep. There's something about the lights of looking at our cell phones and looking at the lights and so forth on television and our all of our devices, computers and so forth, that it activates it activates the parts of the brain that want to keep you awake, and it can interfere with sleep. The other thing is if we're watching things, just scrolling through TikTok videos, YouTube videos, and just scrolling and doom scrolling through, terrible news that's happening 3,000 miles away. And if we're doing a lot of that, our brain experiences little mini traumas with our mirror neurons in our brain, these neurons that mimic whatever we see. So we are, in a sense, experiencing a smaller version of the trauma that these people in Hawaii are experiencing. We are experiencing a small bit of trauma of these people that just went through, a terrible tsunami or whatever the thing is that we're looking at. So I think it's very important to be discriminating about what we expose our brain to. You can be very well informed reading a good quality newspaper and a news magazine, and you don't have to see any scary videos of violence or things like that that are going to cause you undue stress. You still might read an article that is stressful and it's important information you might need to know. However, we don't need to watch it and then go through it. So I think the other thing that happens is we can become numb. And when we become numb to some of the stuff that's happening, we become numb to ourselves. And that's where we can become injured, when we are not even aware of how our body is feeling. We're not even aware of the fact that, we are sitting in a way that's very tight and that's going to cause injury to our back. So numbness is also kind of a sign of a precursor to burnout, and that's harmful. So I do think managing the input that goes into our brain with our devices, and entertainment is fine, but think about the kind of entertainment you're consuming. Do you want to be feeling those feelings, right before bed? Do you want to be feeling in suspense on the edge of your seat right before you want to go to sleep? So those things help. So we need sleep, we need exercise, we need healthy fruits and vegetables in our diet, a good balanced diet for maximum help. And every day, what I recommend is every day people do something to manage their stress. So even just 1 minute of quiet with your eyes closed, just a 1 minute, close your eyes and pay attention to your breathing. Most busy people can manage 1 minute in between meetings and just sit there, close your eyes, do some deep breathing, and just tune into your body and what you're feeling. That can refresh us enough to go into the next meeting and have a little bit of clarity in our mind. Gentle stretches are a good stress management tool, where we just gently do deep breathing, move our arms and legs, stretch our body gently. That can be done in 1 to 2 minutes. So I think that if we give ourselves those little breaks on purpose to manage our daily stress, we're very unlikely to get to a point where stress causes us symptoms where we might need to see a doctor.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a lot of good information from you, doctor. And but still, there is so much to learn from you. And for that, this episode is not enough. They will have to come to you, learn from you. And for those people who would want to consult you to know, to be, professionally, what is the best way to do that, and also how do they get hold of your book, Frazzle Brain?
Thank you. Frazzle Brain is available wherever books are sold. I know it's in India. It's in some libraries in India and in Africa. It's available everywhere books are sold. Amazon Bookshop, and it's just look for Frazzle Brain by Dr. Gina Schneider. And you can find me at frazzlebrain.com. Frazzle Brain is one word, FrazzleBrain.com, Frazzle Brain. And I get back to everyone if you want to ask me a question, or you want to learn about our services, or if you just want to give me some comments about this podcast. I always get back to people, so I love to hear from people.
Wonderful, wonderful. And let me ask you one question. It is not a part of that question, but that I have heard since very early on that nuts are very good for brain, and that you should eat nuts. And
Nuts?
if nuts,
Mm-hmm.
yes, and if nuts are so good for the brain, why do people call "Are you nuts" when they see something?
I love that. I'm going to steal that joke, okay?
Who created this? I want to meet that person.
Yeah, we should eliminate that phrase of people are nuts, because if people really want good mental health, nuts are very good for them. so that's really, yeah, that doesn't make sense. That's an oxymoron, right? Where it doesn't make sense. I like that. That's a good one.
Be that as it may, let's end this with the resolve that let's stress the stress out and not let stress ourselves. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.